There might be fewer players, but there's never a lack of exciting action. This is the statewide Idaho 8-Man Prepcast with Brandon Baney and Paul Kingsbury.
That's right. It's another edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Brandon Baney joined once again by Will Hoenike. Paul Kingsbury, nowhere to be found. He is championship week at IdahoSports.com. Of course, he's a very busy guy. So, yeah.
Yep. Good to be here.
Yeah, Will, thanks for coming on. So for fans of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast, I want to let you know right out the jump that this is going to be our final episode of the season because, well, we're at the pinnacle, right? We're at championship weekend here. It's going to be a lot of fun. Next week, of course, is Thanksgiving week, right? And so as the podcast czar at IdahoSports.com, I want to give everybody the week off. Because we've been working really hard, Will, since August, really doing this every week. And so it's a nice opportunity to get a week off for the holidays, spend time with family and friends and loved ones. And really, that's it for us at the 8-Man Prepcast because 8-Man football will be over. There's nothing else to talk about once we come back from the Thanksgiving break. So all of our fans, we've loved bringing this to you each and every week. We will have it again next fall, starting in August, talking about all the 8-man action again, and we'll give you a really good final show here as we preview the two championship matchups. It's going to be a lot
involved
of fun.
In what, 6 or 8 of these? How many different ones does Idaho Sports do now?
8.
Well, that's a lot of time, and it's not just turning on the mic and talking. You know, it's doing research, it's making sure you got all your facts lined up, you're doing it for 8 different ones. Like, I mean, it's impressive where you're going from talking about, you know, volleyball in District 2 to 8-man football to cross country in District 4, and you're doing it all in like the same day. It's pretty impressive the work that you've been doing. Yeah,
and as we get into the winter sports, I think we're going to consolidate a couple of our prepcasts as well, just so there's less on my plate because it has been a lot. My family is certainly going to appreciate that. They get to see me a little more.
You can reintroduce yourself.
That's right. Hey, I'm the stranger that's kind of been moonlighting at the house here lately. So yeah, this will be our last 8-man prepcast of the year. We'll recap the semifinals, preview the championships, and then next fall, we'll be right back here where we started breaking down the 2022 8-man football season. But before we get there, Will, let's mosey on back to 2021.
Sure.
Let's just start at the 1A D1 level where you had a pair of semifinal games taking place on Saturday. The top-ranked Raft River Trojans hosted Lapwai at their place in Malta, wanted to take the game outside. Actually, weather-wise, ended up being a pretty nice day.
Yeah.
Lapwai scored the first points of the game, right? A 30-yard touchdown pass from Titus Yearout to Cross Taylor, but then Raft River scored the next 51 and won 51-6.
Yep. The thing that about the Division I games, I expected both to be a lot closer. I think that Bill Parcells says people tell you who they are, you just have to listen. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but this is I think it fits a little bit in that I think the better teams won both these games. Man, the Raft River's they're just so balanced. You know, you don't go 9-0, especially in that league, on accident. And you know, what they did to Lapwai was impressive because Lapwai, as we've talked about a lot, Lapwai is a good team with good athletes and good players, and Raft River just shut them down. Frankly, just shut them down.
Yeah, it was really impressive. You know, we talk all the time about these offenses of the teams that are still left in the playoff field, but really, you know, this time of year, you have to be playing pretty good defense to get this far also.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, I mean, you see, you know, 58-42 and you're like, man, no defense has been played. But again, let's remind you, for those of you who are not familiar with the 8-man game, you're playing on the same size field with 3 fewer defenders, okay? So at some point in time, just about every team is going to gash some plays. So it's the team that tackles better, that forces turnovers, that plays good assignment football. Those are the teams that you generally see playing at this point. You'll see a lot of teams that put up some crazy, crazy numbers during the regular season, but when they get into the postseason and they're facing teams like Raft River and they're facing teams like Oakley, the sledding gets a little bit tougher. And I think that that's what separates, the good from the great, if you will. And I think that over time, if we were to look back and do kind of a deep dive analytically year to year, the teams that are holding those banners at the end of the year aren't always the number one scoring teams, but they're usually going to be among the better defensive teams in the classification, whether it's Division I or Division II. So yeah, defense in the 8-man game, it's considered an offensive league, and justifiably so, but you've got to be able to play some defense if you want to win a championship.
To hold Lapway to 6 points, I mean, nothing short of incredible. Right?
It's fantastic. Like I openly wondered the week before when Lapway beat Prairie, and now Prairie was a little shorthanded, say what you will, and I understand that and I respect that, but the performance that Titus Year Out had in that game, I wondered if that would kind of push him to the top of the Division I Player of the Year voting. Because, you do something like that in the playoffs, 500 total yards, 9 touchdowns, that's going to stick in people's minds. Now, to come back the following week, and he didn't play terribly. He did okay. His numbers were okay, but his team didn't do as well. Does that just open it back up maybe for someone else? And I guess that's the joy of the coaches voting on this thing, is they know a lot better than you and I do. And they're going to sit down and they're going to cast their ballots, and we're going to find out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 2 finalists, Raft River and Oakley. I mean, I couldn't even tell you who would be the nomination from that team for the 1AD1 Player of the Year award, because there's so many.
That's the crazy thing about it, is you go back in years past, when Cole Martin won it a couple years ago for Prairie, I thought it was a no-brainer. I thought it was easy. A number of times. The Dean Johnson winning last year, and he deserved it. Another Prairie kid won it last year. That was one of those of, well, there's a lot of really good candidates here. And there comes a point where they kind of subtract from each other. Like, let's see, if for instance, let's use Raft River as an example. Thane Lockmiller, Cole Spencer, Alex Murillo, Tate Whitaker, Tegan Whitaker. Should I go on? At some point, are they kind of, and I say this very lightheartedly, I don't mean this to sound as serious as it sounds, but at some point, are they kind of taking votes from each other a little bit and maybe allowing someone else the opportunity to sneak in? I just, in D1 in particular, in D2, we can talk about it later if you want. I think there's 2 or 3 guys that have kind of separated themselves from the field. I don't think that's the case in D1. Oakley, is it Dace Jones? That's kind of where I would lean. But then you've got Peyton Beck, you've got Ethan Torbow, you've got Bryce Sevier. Which one? How do you pick just one?
Yeah, both ends playing against the middle a little bit for those 2 teams. And so all those guys you just rattled off for Raft River, they all scored. I mean, we talked about the balance and versatility in that 51-6 win over Lapway. No single player had more than a touchdown. I mean, Tegan Whitaker, Alex Murillo, pass from Tate Whitaker to Gabe Briggs, and then Whitaker found Thane Lockmiller. And then in the second half, Cole Spencer, Benny Smith, Kai Ward. I mean, you're talking about 9 different touchdowns scored 9 different ways by 9 different players.
Yeah. And that's, I think, again, part of the reason why Raft River is where they are. You can't load up the box and say, I'm going to take away this one running back and they can't beat me. Because if you do that, they got 3 or 4 other guys who can, but you throw the ball downfield to Seth Tracy. He's a good football player too. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's why I think Raft River and Oakley are the last 2 teams standing. Is among all teams, they might be the 2 most diverse in terms of personnel and the number of ways that they can beat you. They might be the 2 best, and they both play really, really good defense. I mean, I looked it up earlier today. Raft River, 13 points a game allowed. Oakley, just over 12. When they played, the final score was 22-16. Raft River won the game 22-16. Those 2 scores were by far, it was the fewest points that Raft River scored all year by far. It was the fewest points that Oakley scored all year by far. Versatility in defense matters, and these 2 teams both have it.
Certainly. So let's talk about Oakley. They defeat Butte County 52-22. This was a wild start to the game. This is the game that I was at on Saturday inside Holt Arena. Oakley goes 3-and-out early on in the game, and they're having to punt. And Boone Gamet comes through, Will, for Butte County and blocks the punt in the end zone. It spins out to about the 2-yard line. He is able to recover from, making the play on the block to see the ball, scoop it up, and take it in for the Butte County touchdown. So Boone Gamet not only blocked the punt, but he also scooped it up and took it in 2 yards for the touchdown. And you're thinking, all right, Butte County's just made a huge special teams play. I talked to Coach Thorngren before the game. I said, what are the keys to the game? He said, special teams and turnovers, deep in the playoffs. And so I thought, okay, here's Butte County. They've got the momentum. Well, on the very next kickoff, Oakley executes a handoff at the 20-yard line, and Bridger Duncan takes it 80 yards for a tying touchdown. So just like that, the special teams advantage is neutralized. Yep. And then they kick off to Butte County. The Pirates go 3-and-out. They have to punt. Oakley comes through and blocks the punt. It sets him up at the 14-yard line. And from there, Peyton Beck runs it in from 3 yards out. And Oakley was up 16-8. And you felt that they gave it away early on special teams, but then made back-to-back big plays on special teams to take the game back. It was a really wild start to the game.
Yeah, and then that just sucks the fans in, too, and makes it that much more fun to watch when, you could see a huge play in any facet of the game at any time. And Oakley's been one of those teams all year that have made big plays on offense or on defense or at times on special teams. And, again, I thought I expected that to be a closer end result than it was. But, Butte County went out there. They left it on the field. They did what they could. I don't think that Sam Thorngren or the Pirates have anything to hang their hats about. I mean, he might be able to say, come Thursday night at about 9:00, hey, the team that knocked us out is hoisting the state championship trophy right now. We don't know that. It's a very good team. It's a very respectable team as well, as far as, nobody ran over them. You know what I mean? They were able to stand in there and trade some punches, and then they just wore down a little bit as the game went on, which can certainly happen in the 8-man game.
Yeah, the key to the game was Butte County's physicality versus Oakley's speed, and Oakley's speed won out. They tried to run on the edges with Trayton Miller. Oakley was there almost every single time, ready to make a tackle, either for a loss or, a gain of a yard. And that was the problem with Butte County, is they didn't get those big plays. It was a yard here, 2 yards there, and then they're having to pass on 3rd and long. And so Oakley's speed really stood out over Butte County's physicality. That's what won it, in my opinion.
And I agree with you. And something that's funny about it, it's something that's so obvious, but it was something I'd never really thought of. I had a coach tell me recently, one of the hard things about 8-man football is you don't have the same opportunity to adjust. Because, so say your offense gets stymied, okay? The same 8 kids that just played offense usually are playing defense. So you don't really have a chance to get your assistant coach or maybe yourself to sit down with the O-line or the backs or whatever and whiteboard anything up and say, here's what they're doing to us. You have to wait till the end of the quarter. You have to wait until halftime. It's much harder to adjust. So you go in, and we'll use this as an example. It may not be the best example, but it's the one we have, so we'll go with it. The Pirates may have thought they had something going outside the guards. Okay, so Coach Thorngren and his staff, they install the game plan around, we think we have the ability to win some battles here. Well, then they realize that they can't. And it's not always easy as well. We'll just call some different plays. You can't just wad up the game plan and throw the game plan away and make that adjustment on the fly, because the kids are on the field. And it makes it harder to adjust sometimes. And that's why sometimes I think you see in 8-man games, God, why do they keep doing this? How are they not blocking that guy? How are they not doing this? Sometimes it's hard to make some of those little fine adjustments. Some broad ones, sure, you can make the big ones. Hey, they're blowing us up on the pass rush, so we've got to scrap our deep drop passes. Some of those fine, but some of the subtle little ones, like, hey, 52 on the end is just killing us. We got to shift our blocking so we can get a second blocker over there. So we're going to have to take the running back out of the pass pattern some of those smaller adjustments, those are harder to make in the 8-man game just because the kids are always on the field.
Yeah, and speaking of the pass rush, that was the other key was Butte County just couldn't generate a pass rush. Peyton Beck had all day to throw, and a player like that doesn't even need all day to pick you apart. And so that was the other big key was Butte County just couldn't generate that consistent pass rush to make Peyton Beck unsettled. We talked about Dace Jones a lot this year, right? And his skills on offense as a wide receiver. I'm not sure I've seen a better defensive player in the 8-man ranks this year than Dace Jones.
I wholly agree.
He was a missile. Yeah. He was flying all over the field. He had so many hard hits, like hits that I could hear up in the booth. I mean, it was amazing to watch.
You know, I've watched a lot of video of that young man play, and he's a fantastic offensive football player. If his goal is to play at the next level, and I believe it is, that, you know, a lot of these kids would love an opportunity to play college football. Let's not kid ourselves. I think, you know, put on 20 pounds and be a linebacker or be a safety. His instincts on defense, you've got to account for him on every play. It doesn't matter if he's covering somebody all the way out on the left and you're running to the right. When the whistle blows, he's probably going to be over there. He's probably going to be in that play. And you're right. He is a fantastic defensive player and has had just a fantastic defensive year. Again, we tend to look at offense. But you know, I'd have to think if I'm a College of Idaho, if I'm a Carroll College, if I'm an Eastern Oregon University, and I need somebody that I can groom to maybe play as an outside linebacker or maybe a safety. I don't know what his time in the 40 is, so I can't break it down to that level. But in terms of sometimes you just got to say, hey, that kid can play football. There was a player a few years ago at Valley High School, and Valley's coming back to 1A next year. They've been up at 2A. There was a kid named Jason Hardy. He was quarterback / defensive back, and all he did was make big plays. You know, he was 5'9", 160 pounds. So everybody looked at him and said, the measurables. Who cares? Does he make plays or not? You know, give me 8, since we're talking about 8, or 11. Give me 11 kids that know how to make plays, you know, that know how to score touchdowns, that know how to read angles, that know how to fill the hole. Give me those kids every time, and I'm going to go win some championships.
Yeah, on defense, you don't need 8 all-state players. You just need 8 guys that work cohesively as a unit. Oakley's defense is on point right now. The last thing we want to talk about with the Oakley Butte County game, and then we'll preview the championship, is on social media. I'm sure a lot of 8-man fans have seen this, that there was a sign that Oakley had out onto the field prior to the team running out to start the second half. You know, it was one of those signs made on paper, and the team ran through it and busted it up. And, you know, the sign said something to the effect of, hey, Butte County, your mom says you left your game at home. Now, Butte County, there was a nice article written just in the last week and a half about a player for Butte County, Porter Taylor, whose mom tragically passed away in a DUI-related car accident. Somebody else hit her. Mm-hmm. And so it was a sensitive subject for Butte County. Now, I will say that as a neutral observer, I don't think there was malice or intent behind the sign that Oakley had. I don't think they were aware that had happened and that was a situation. I think it was just a sign that they put together. They thought it would be funny, and it ended up being in poor taste. But I don't think there was any intent behind it. Mm-hmm. And I guess, to me, as a general rule moving forward, you know, just make a sign to celebrate your own team as opposed to, you know, saying something against the other team. But again, I don't think there was intent behind it.
Yeah, so. I 100% agree with you. I do not think for a second that Oakley was trying to rub anyone's face in anything. But to your point, I think this is a great teaching moment, if you will, going forward. And we're not talking just about Oakley. You know, if you're at Chalice, if you're at Council, if you're in Mullen, you know, wherever you may be, you're at Clark Fork, you hear about this. This is an opportunity to say, hey, this is why we need to just celebrate ourselves. We don't need to bring the other team into it, especially in that situation. You know, Oakley's got more than enough to celebrate. without bringing anything else into it. Let's just take care of our own house here. Let's just look after ourselves. Let's celebrate our team. Let's celebrate our players. Let's celebrate our community, and just go with that. I think this is a great opportunity for everybody. And again, all across the state, 1A to 5A, to have that conversation. But I'm with you. I don't believe for a moment that there was anything nefarious, anything deliberate, anything intentional involved here. It was just a goof. And I don't fault the Butte County community for being upset. I would be. I mean, I think we're all that way. When an open wound gets touched, you recoil. And I think what you're seeing the greater Arco community recoil a little bit. And while I understand why they're doing it.
Yep. So again, it's something that could have been avoided, but as you said, Will, a great teaching moment moving forward for everybody, not just Oakley, but everybody. So let's talk about this championship matchup. All right. This is the game that everybody wanted to see, I think, in terms of, not Butte County and Lapwai fans, but everybody statewide thought this was going to be a good matchup. This was kind of what people thought coming into the season. These two teams played 3 times in 2020, right? They played because of COVID-19. They played early on in August. Oakley won that game. They played in the regular season finale. Raft River won that game. Then they met in last year's championship. Oakley won that game. Then to the regular season this year, Raft River wins. I feel like this is the World Series, Will. This is like a best of 7 game series, and they're trading blows.
Yeah, and I think there are 2 teams in certain contexts that are a little bit of mirror images of each other, and that's why you see, one game is Team X by 6, the next game is Team Y by 6. I think that's why we see it. And we go back to their matchup in the regular season, 22-16. And really the game basically swung in the first half on about a 4-5 play sequence where Raft River throws a touchdown on 4th and goal. Then Oakley fumbles on the ensuing kickoff. And then Raft River punches it in. And maybe it wasn't the ensuing kickoff, but ensuing possession. Oakley turns it over, and then Raft River turns around and punches it in. Well, there's 2 of your 3 touchdowns right there. These are 2 evenly matched teams. These are 2 teams that statistically, we talked about it, one allows 12.9 points a game, one allows 12.2. One averages 55 points a game, one averages 49. They each held the other to its lowest point total of the year by a remarkably large margin. So, I mean, just you look at it on paper and it's just like, how do you pick between these 2? And I'm going to give you one X factor here. And I know it gets talked about a little bit down around Oakley. Go back to, we're talking about their game against each other on October, I believe it was October 16th. Go back a month before that when Oakley played Pahranagat Valley of Nevada. Okay. The final score of that game was Oakley 52, Pahranagat Valley 6. Do you know how many points Pahranagat Valley has given up since then?
0.
12.
Okay.
They've given up 12 total points since then, and they play for the Nevada State Championship on the 20th. And Oakley beat them 52-6. So I look at that game and I'm like, wow, maybe that's one that in Idaho, because we don't know a lot about, and I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, Pahranagat Valley. But that is a perennial Nevada power. They had like some 100-game winning streak or something like that not that long ago. But now they're going to play for a state championship, and Oakley traveled down into Nevada. They played at a neutral site and beat them 52-6. That's got to say something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did kind of fly under the radar when it first happened, and then you and I dug deeper into this team, and I believe they had an 18-game winning streak going into the matchup with Oakley.
They did.
that got snapped. They were the defending champions, and as you mentioned, a powerhouse. Basically, they're Nevada's version of like Carey at the 1AT2 level, where they just year in year out are competing for championships, and for Oakley to go there and basically whitewash them like that. Was very impressive. So.
Yeah. And then Pahranagat Valley shuts out like the next 5 teams they played, and then won last week something like 58-12. So it's, they're not some sisters of the poor, to quote the old, Big Ten commissioner joke. It's a good football team, and Oakley absolutely obliterated them. And I think it goes to show just how good Oakley and Raft River are. I'm not using this to denigrate Pahranagat Valley at all. This is how good some of Idaho's 8-man football teams are. They're no joke. They can play.
Yeah, for sure. So I was at the first game between Raft River and Oakley. I had the call on IdahoSports.com, so I got the front row seat.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I got the front row seat to it. It really did come down to three things. Defense, certainly. You talked about Oakley with that key fumble that directly led to a touchdown for Raft River. It was the first and really only time this year that I've seen where Peyton Beck was flustered and didn't have much time to pass. Raft River's defensive line really held the point of attack and did a great job. The second factor was special teams. Raft River, they couldn't have asked for a better start to the game. They kick off to Oakley. Oakley goes 3 and out. They're punting to Raft River. Tegan Whitaker returns it 60 yards for a touchdown. So like that, Raft River's up 8-0 without even having to do anything on offense. The third factor was penalties. Penalties absolutely killed Oakley in a couple of tight spots, including late in the game where they were driving. I mean, they were driving for the win potentially because they lost 22-16. So I guess they were driving for the tie. And they had the momentum in that second half. For as good as Raft River started, Oakley owned the second half, and they had all the momentum, and they were driving late in the game. They had the ball around Raft River's 30-yard line, and a key costly penalty ended up moving them back to midfield to where all of a sudden, instead of, 4th and 5, they were, 4th and 19. And Peyton Beck just having to take a shot deep, and he never even got the opportunity because by the time his receivers were far enough to get the first down, Raft River's defensive line was there to make the tackle. So that was the key, was penalties. And so you're playing inside Holt Arena now. Both teams have played a game inside Holt Arena this postseason. It does seem like as we get further into the playoffs, the penalties become more and more common, especially holding calls, and I've done, games from the 4A level all the way down to 1A D2, and across the board, it seems like penalty flags are out more than they were in the regular season. So I think it could come down to penalties, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah. Discipline is always vital in the postseason. It's, you're giving up free yards, and, when you move yourself back, when you, maybe you score a touchdown and it gets called back because of a hold, and now you've got to do it all over again. Those are the kinds of mistakes that can ultimately swing a game. They can really swing a game. And you talk about just the small margin for error that there's going to be in this matchup. Something as simple as what you just described, a pass for a first down that gets called back because of a penalty on 4th down, and now you got to do it all over again. And guess what? You don't get the first down. Presto. There's, just go ahead and write that one down in the book as whether you want to call it hidden yards or lost yards or failed yards or whatever you want to classify it as. Absolutely humongous factor in a matchup like this.
So I do. I lean my official pick. I can't change it at this point.
You've been on this train since July. If you changed it now, I would call BS on you.
I know I'd be such a fraud. I'm going Raft River, and I really do believe in my heart of hearts that Raft River is the better team. Now, again, if Oakley comes out and plays well, I'll own it. But I've said Raft River since way back in the preseason. They've been my number one team all year long. They've continued to show off their diversity and their talent. And I really think their defensive line, just like the first game, really wins the matchup here. Devin Jones is the best 2-way lineman I've seen in 1A D1 football. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of good linemen out there, but he's the best that I've seen. He can take over a game at both sides. On offense, he can push the pile, and on defense, he can really get after the quarterback as well.
Raft River always seems to have good linemen, no matter what. It always seems like they're really strong in the trenches. Now, I lean a tiny bit the other way. I lean Oakley a touch, and I know that Coach Evans is going to give me a hard time about this if Raft River comes through and wins. But like you said, I'll own it if it happens. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I could see, I expect it to be in the 30-20 range. And I'm not going to be shocked if Oakley wins it. I'm not going to be shocked if Raft River wins it. It's a very evenly matched game, and it comes down to those little things, like you said. Which team can avoid the turnovers? Which team can win the special teams battle? Create an opportunity with a big punt return or a kickoff return or recover an onside kick, something of that nature. And penalties, who plays smart, who plays disciplined. It's all going to come into play because both teams have exceptional football players. And it sounds weird to say, I don't think that talent on the field is going to be the ultimate deciding factor, if that makes sense. Because they're both very talented. I don't think you can discern a strong enough gap between one team or the other where you can say, oh, well, that team is physically just better. You can have that opinion. Now I'm kind of confusing people potentially, but what I'm saying is I think it's going to be the things like the penalties, like field position, like special teams, punting and booming a 50-yarder that rolls versus shanking one off the side of your foot and having it go out of bounds 10 yards downfield. That's a big factor in a game like this.
Yeah. So bottom line, you wore your Oakley red shirt today, Will, and that's why
not even deliberately, but you're not wearing your Raft River blue.
I'm wearing a neutral gray. Yeah, it's just a t-shirt. So if you want to see what we're wearing, you can always watch the video of this Prepcast at the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page. Audio only as well, available at IdahoSports.com. Across the top of the homepage, you'll see Prepcasts tab. Puts a drop-down menu down. You just click 8-Man Prepcast. You can listen to it there or wherever you download your podcasts. All right, one championship down, one to go. We're going to take a break, hear from our sponsors at the Idaho Division of Public Health, and when we come back, we'll talk about the 1A D2 championship coming up. I should mention, I guess, real quick, that 1A D1 championship will be Thursday in Holt Arena, 6:30 kickoff. It'll be the first game of a doubleheader Thursday night in Holt Arena in Pocatello. And, of course, we will have the coverage on IdahoSports.com. All right, we'll take a break. 1A D2 championship coming up next here on the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast from IdahoSports.com.
It's time to start planning for back to school. That's why I got my kids vaccinated for COVID-19. Kids 12 and older can get vaccinated. The vaccines have been researched and tested. They're safe and they work. And I hope everyone will choose to get vaccinated too.
Back on the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, Brandon Baney with Will Hoenike as we transition now to the 1A D2 ranks. First, let's revisit the semifinals super quick. Up north at the Kibbe Dome in Moscow on the top half of the bracket, you had Kendrick taking on Castleford, and this was kind of a back-and-forth game in the first half. But then in the second half, Kendrick started making some plays to pull away.
Really impressed with Kendrick in that game, and it's not to say I'm unimpressed with Castleford. For them, for Zane Hobart and his team to play the way they did in the second half against Castleford is what makes it impressive. And while it was the usual suspect, their offense was good and it was dynamic and it was creating big plays. 5 interceptions, 5 picks. I mean, that's some yeoman's work there by that Kendrick defense against a really good offense.
Yeah, and Kendrick, we talked about there, the versatility of Raft River and Oakley in the last segment. Kendrick has a lot of playmakers on offense that can really beat you. Ty Kep is the quarterback, and he kind of, is at master control, but you've got Wyatt Fitzmaurice, and you've got the, is it the Taylor brothers? I'm trying to remember.
Hewitt. Sawyer and Jagger Hewitt. You've got Hunter Taylor, who had, and this is funny, we can talk about this more later on, 3 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown, and a touchdown catch. You had somebody do it in both D2 games.
Yes.
Such an odd stat line, but Hunter Taylor, really came through, especially on defense. But you're right. It's, we jokingly refer to it as an embarrassment of riches. I don't think any team should be embarrassed at having a plethora of options. And, to have a kid like Ty Kep, who is one of the most experienced sophomores you're ever going to meet in terms of football, to have him running the show, so to speak, is a tremendous luxury for the Kendrick program.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. So Paul Kingsbury and I were on the call for the Carey Dietrich game, and so we started an hour earlier than that Kendrick Castleford game, right? Since they're in the Pacific time zone,
right? Yep.
And so as we're getting towards the end of our game, and It's the outcome is kind of decided. We really start scoreboard watching that game up north. And it in that first half, like I said, it swung, Castleford had the lead, and then Kendrick took it back, and then Castleford took it back. Castleford actually led at halftime 22-20, but that third quarter was the decider. Things kind of unraveled for Castleford in that third quarter. Ty Kep scored on a 2-yard run. He threw a pass to Jagger Hewitt for the 2-point conversion. Fitzmaurice scored. Kep found Hewitt again. I mean, just an avalanche of points. 3 unanswered touchdowns by Kendrick is really what salted it away as the Tigers won 46-30 the final.
Yeah, and it can swing so fast in 8-man football. It really can. It can go from, go back last week, Carey playing Mullen St. Regis in the quarterfinals. The score was something like, 18-6 at halftime. And what was the final score? 60-12, something like that. A team wears down, a couple of mistakes, a couple turnovers, whatever. And, we mentioned Kendrick forcing 5 turnovers via interception. So, you get a touchdown, and then if you get one of those interceptions and you score again, that's 12, 14, 16 points right there. And you've just changed the face of a game.
And for Castleford, what a season they had. I know they wanted another shot at Carey in the championship game. That's not going to happen. But for Castleford, a team that's not, this time of year we're usually talking about Carey and Kendrick in recent years. But for Castleford, they don't have the history like some of these other 8-man schools do. So it was really nice to see them break through and get to the semifinals this year.
It had to be a lot of fun for that community to follow that team because they represented the town and the school so well in terms of their, the on-field production and winning games. And, for a lot of years, Castleford struggled, 2, 3, 4 wins, but could never really punch up into that upper echelon, which again, in this particular league, you're talking about Carey, you're talking about Dietrich. For a long time, you're talking about Lighthouse Christian. That's a tough nugget to crack there. And the window opened a little bit this year in Castleford, to their credit, their coaching staff and their kids, to win 7-8 ball games, to get to the semifinals, to be one of the last 4 teams standing. I guarantee it hurt walking off that field, and it hurt on that bus ride home. But I think they got a lot to be proud of, and I think they got a lot to be really, really happy about. And when they're looking back on it in future years, it's going to be a lot of good. And, ultimately, we're sad that we lost, but it's going to be a lot of good memories.
And now the interesting thing is with Carey moving to the 1A D1 level next year, it kind of creates this void, not just on a statewide level, but in the conference as well. Castleford is primed to maybe repeat that success moving forward.
Yeah, some of those teams like, Hanson and Camas County, and until this year, Castleford, teams that have been on the wrong end of some pretty lopsided scores against a program like Carey, they got to be thinking, thank God. It's kind of like Ollie in the movie Hoosiers when Strap finally comes out of the locker room and goes into the game and Ollie doesn't have to play, and he's like, whew. I guarantee you that the Hanson Huskies are not going to be too sad to not see Carey on their schedule next year. I promise you that one.
And on the other side, what was already a loaded conference in 1A D1, right? Oakley, Raft River, Lighthouse, Murtaugh. Hey, we're going to throw Carey into the mix as well. I mean, that's going to be.
And it's they're not like some, again, it's not, they may be a quote unquote smaller school, but they've got 30 kids out there, and these are kids that are, they're used to winning. They know how to win. They know the system. They know what they're doing. They're going to go up and they're going to compete. I'm not going to promise 10-0 in state championship by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think anybody in the region should be the least bit surprised, this time next year, if we're reminiscing on Carey making the playoffs. We shouldn't be surprised by that at all. Lane Kirkland and his staff and that school district and that community and those kids, they know how to get it done there. And I have very little doubt in my mind that they'll continue to get it done at the Division I ranks. Maybe not as dominantly as it was, because there is a little bit of a difference in competition, but it's not like they've just been sneaking by teams 28-24 every week for the past 15 years. They've been dropping the hammer on somebody. Let's remember, they beat a 4A team last year. They beat Wood River last year. They've got the talent, they've got the skill, and they've got good coaches. They'll do fine.
Yeah, Lighthouse Christian moved up to the D1 level 2 years ago and got to the semifinals in their first year. I could see something very similar for
wouldn't
Carey.
blow me away. Wouldn't blow me away.
Yep. Speaking of Carey, for now, they have one more 1A D2 title within their reach as they took on Dietrich and won 54-20. And this was a game that, I basically said, Dietrich is going to have to match Carey score for score. They came in with the game plan of, we want to control the clock, keep that Carey offense off the field, because, I asked assistant coach Brody Estelle, I said, hey, when you guys played in the regular season, I mean, you were a play away from winning that game.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what did you do that was so successful that nobody else has been able to do? And he said, we really took the time of possession on our opening drive. We took 10 minutes off the clock and went down and scored. And he said, that's kind of the key is, you're not going to be able to stop the Carey offense every time. So how do you stop them? Well, you limit their possessions. And so they came in with the idea of, we're going to control the clock, ball control, all that great stuff. Well, that only works if you're able to dictate the tempo from the start. And they got down early and had to kind of shift their game plan, and they really became one-dimensional in the passing game. And from there, I mean, it was like a snowball rolling down a hill.
And Dietrich has a pretty good passing attack when you look at Cody Power at quarterback, Peyton Sned, and you've got Jet Shaw, a very good player. So they're able to do some things, but you're right. You can't get behind. You can't get into it. I mean, and behind is a relative term. You can get behind 6-8 points where you have a chance to answer right back. But when that lead suddenly becomes 18 points, 20 points, you're in trouble. Carey is a little bit like that snake that just knows how to squeeze until there's nothing left to squeeze. You know what I mean? They know how to do that. That's why they do what they do, is because they can. They know how to do it. They've done it. So yeah, it's for Dietrich. What they needed to do is they needed a quick start. Didn't really happen. And they needed to avoid letting Carey get any kind of separation. Didn't happen. And the end results, as a result, not a huge surprise.
Yeah, it was 8-6 Carey after one quarter, and then kind of like Kendrick in that third quarter against Castleford, Carey scored 3 unanswered touchdowns in the second quarter, and from there the game was basically decided at that point.
Yeah, I mean 8-6 you can work with. 32-6, nope.
Yes, and yeah, for Dietrich, I mean, they scored as time expired. At the end of the first half. Power threw up a touchdown to Case Robertson as zeros hit the clock. And you thought, okay, Dietrich's got a little momentum. That still only made it 32-14, but Dietrich did get the ball to start the second half. And I thought, okay, if they can score here, maybe they can claw their way back in, but they weren't able to.
That's the magic term. And I mean, you as a coach, you have to have that optimism. And as a player, you've got to think you can do it. But realistically, how many times, and it does happen, let's not kid ourselves, but how many times, especially when you get into a playoff setting, how many times have you seen Team X, get down, and even if they do score right before the half, to cut the deficit to 20? Even if they do score that next time, they're still down 2 scores. That hole is deep. It's hard to overcome, not impossible, can be done. But boy, you're trying to do that against a team like Carey. It's that's a tall order for anybody.
The Carey defense, I mean, was their usual dominant self, right? Nick Versus was all over making plays. Ellis Hansen Ellis was in there making a bunch of plays. And so for Carey now, they advanced to the championship game against Kendrick. This is the team that they met in the semifinals last year. Won that game pretty convincingly, but here they are again trying to win back-to-back title, or win after falling in the championship game last year.
Yeah, you go back to 2004. That's when the IHSAA split the 1A 8-man between Division I and Division II. Horseshoe Bend won the state championship in 2004. Mackey won it in 2005. From 2006 to 2019, Carey, Lighthouse Christian, Salmon River. Those were the only 3 teams that won it. Now, Dietrich won it last year, but Carey was there. And Carey's there again this year. They're just kind of like this omnipresent thing, at least for one more year. They know how to do it, and they know how to get it done. And Kendrick, they've been in the playoffs somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 of the last 8 years. They've been to the semifinal a couple of times. They went to a state championship game against Salmon River back in 2000. I'm cheating here, trying to see if I can find it. 2016, I believe. So, they know as well a little bit about what to expect in the playoffs, but just that long history of success that Carey has gives them a little bit of an advantage. Carey, Kendrick has the tools. They absolutely have the tools to punch. But I think much like Dietrich, I think the key for Kendrick is going to be a fast start. Get an early score, get 2 early scores, create a turnover, create some positive momentum. Don't dig a hole. Don't let Carey get away from you even a little bit, even 12-0, even 14-0. That might be too much. That's how good Carey is capable of being.
I mean, it's very rare that they don't cash in on a possession by scoring, right? I mean, that's kind of the key. They're so efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like. We talked about it earlier. We talked about Ty Kep. I think he's one of those kids that could be in the conversation for State Player of the Year, and he's kind of done it. I don't want to say quietly, but he's done it very steadily. And one of his chief competitors is going to be on the other sideline in Connor Simpson. And I think that the player we can't forget about, even though his team went out early in the playoffs, surprisingly, Bridger Hatch from North Gem. Those I think are the 3 kids in my mind anyway that I think are the strong candidates. And the thing that's crazy about it, Kep's a sophomore. He's just a sophomore. The kid can play. The kid can flat out play, and I expect him to make some plays. I expect this, I've been saying this all along. I expect this to be a tight football game. I don't see a team running away. But I think if it's going to happen, I think if Carey scores early and gets a stop or forces a turnover and scores again, will Kendrick be able to stay with their game plan? Will they be able to, or will they have to change things up and start taking some shots to try and get back in the game? Because if they have to alter the game plan and start taking chances, that's where the snake starts to constrict a little bit, and that's where a game could get sideways.
Yeah, you brought up a good point with Kep only being a sophomore. Connor Simpson's only a junior, and last year he was the lead back in that offense as a sophomore as well. And so it's nice to see these younger players breaking through. One underreported thing for Carey is they made a quarterback change. As I was talking to Paul Kingsbury last week, before we went on the air, Chase Benyon was kind of their quarterback through a lot of the regular season, I think. And then as we got to the playoffs, Carson Perks makes the switch from, receiver to QB. Benyon moves from QB to tight end. It's really opened things up for this Carey offense. And that's what you get in a veteran coach like Lane Kirkland that isn't afraid to make that type of change heading into the playoffs.
Boy, isn't it nice to have that versatility too, where you just, you can move guys around. We saw Dietrich do it earlier in the year, switching Peyton Snedden and Cody Power, and it really impacted their season. And Carey, boy, how nice is it to be able to make that switch and not even really miss a beat? And you mentioned Connor Simpson. He's a big part of why, when you have a guy, if the offense is struggling, that you can just tell your offensive lineman, just give me a push. We're going to hand it off, and we're just going to go 5 yards down the field until Simpson breaks one, because invariably he's going to break one. He pretty much always, it seems like every game you go down and it's like 5, 7, 5, 5, 40. You know what I mean? There's always 1 or 2 of those runs in there. And, the thing that's so incredible about him, and this was pointed out to me by Garden Valley head coach Jason Yearsley, he doesn't have exceptional blazing speed per se, but he gets to that top speed so fast. You see guys take bad angles all the time because they think they can beat him to the corner, and they can't, because he's one step and boom, he's full go, and he beats people just by that. And when you open up a little crease, he's not a big guy, he can get kind of lost in there, and you open up a little crease for him and he hits full stride in one step, the slightest false step by a linebacker or a DB, and it's over. He's gone. He's by you. He's just been an incredible asset for that team the last couple of years.
Yeah. So officially, I'm going to lean Carey. Big surprise. Carey's just, they're so good. And to me, it's not that Kendrick isn't good. It's just that Carey has proved time and again that this time of year, they're tough to beat. And for Kendrick, they haven't quite earned that trust yet, as they are still trying to, they've gotten deep into the playoffs, but they haven't quite been able to finish it off yet. Now, maybe this is the year they do, and it wouldn't surprise me, but I think officially I'm going to go Carey, and maybe Carey by, 2 scores, something like that.
For the sake of inspiring a little talk, it'd be easy for me to agree, right? But since you took Carey, I will lean again slightly to the Kendrick side. I've been so impressed. What they were able to do in horrible conditions in the quarterfinals against Horseshoe Bend, they looked great. And then they have to go play, a very good Castleford team, and they looked great. And then they get the short bus ride. The game is in their backyard. Carey's the team that's going to have to make the trip. So I will chalk all those little things up, and I'm a big Ty Kep fan, and the Hewitts, and you mentioned Fitzmaurice and Hunter Taylor. Riley Morey, by the way, for Carey is the other 3 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, 1 pass catch for a touchdown. I don't think I've ever even heard of it. 2 semifinals where a kid on each, in each game did the exact same thing like that. But I'll give Kendrick a tiny edge. But like I said, I think this one, whereas I think the 1A Division I game is going to be a little lower scoring, I think this one has the potential to be a little higher scoring, a 46-40 type of game. And I'm not going to be blown away if either team wins it. But I do think if one of the 2 teams is more likely to pull away and win going away, I think it's probably going to be Carey. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm tempting the football gods to see if Kendrick can get out to maybe a 2 or 3 score lead themselves, and then they can be the team that puts the squeeze on a little bit. We'll see. We'll see this weekend.
Kendrick will have the home field advantage. This game will be the final championship game in the state of Idaho, Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. in the Kibbe Dome in Moscow. And so, again, we will have coverage of that on IdahoSports.com. All right, well, this was a really fun season of 8-man football. As we're kind of wrapping up the 8-man Prepcast for the year, we had a lot of good conversation, a lot of good topics sparked. And I think, we had a lot of support and that's what really makes these podcasts possible are the fan support from parents, coaches, even players. I think players sometimes tune into this stuff too. So it's been a lot of fun to do this every week.
It has been. It's been a blast, and it's great for me. The whole Idaho 8-man thing began because I've watched as media resources have been cut, and as a result, the kids who have felt it are often the farthest out kids, the smallest schools, the most rural, the most isolated. The Lewiston Tribune can't afford to send somebody every week up to Kuski for the Clearwater Valley game. And I'm using them as an example because I think they do a fantastic job in coverage. But I tell people all the time, it's the instinct is when you've lost a little bit of coverage, the instinct is you see a reporter at your game. The instinct is to make some sort of a snarky comment, well, about time or something like that. I think the pendulum needs to swing the other way. And if we see the Lewiston Tribune, if we see the Idaho Statesman, the Post Register, if we see them at our gyms, if we see them at our fields, we need to go up. We need to say thanks. Just, hey, we know you're dealing with limited resources, but boy, we're thankful to see you here. Because I'll tell you, without those, the newspapers, the TV stations, John up in Sun Valley covering, Carey the way he does, without them, it's hard for me to do what I do. A lot of people thank me for what I do. I couldn't do what I do without the efforts of the local media statewide. So I certainly appreciate, all of them, from the Bonner County Bee all the way down to, the Idaho State Journal down in Pocatello. And I think it's awesome. And I hope to continue it for a long time. And I hope that coverage eventually swings back up from traditional media outlets.
Yeah, it's been nice. And again, you're right. It is a communal effort from everybody statewide. Idaho is a big state. And so it's nice for us to be able to kind of take it all and put it into one place each week for everybody to come and kind of
Right.
digest all that information, right?
Correct. In one short 55-minute block.
That's right. That's right. Well, it was our last episode of the year, so we had to go a little long.
Hey, championship. You got to let it breathe a little bit.
That's right. That's right. Well, Will, thanks for everything that you do for the athletes in the state of Idaho, trying to shine that spotlight on it a little bit brighter. And thanks for stepping in and doing this every week as well. I've had a blast doing these.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks to you guys. I mean, a lot of these, my ability to see some of these games. I live in the Boise area, and as much as I'd like to be able to drive to some of these games and watch them with my own eyes, I can't. So, a lot of times you guys are my eyes, and being able to click onto Idaho Sports and watch a game or listen to a game. I mean, I can't even tell you how great that's been this year. And I mean, in years past and in years to come too.
Yep, we love doing it. So thanks to everybody who tuned into the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast all season long. We're going to go into hibernation. We'll reemerge next August as we get ready for the 2022 8-Man football season. Enjoy the championship games this weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next year on IdahoSports.com. For Will Hoenike, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in one final time to the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.